Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined by an awesome progressive from the great state of West Virginia, running for West Virginia's 2nd district, which is a crazy shaped district. I'll pull that up in a minute. Cathy Kunkel, how you doing, Cathy?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me about your background, your candidacy, your race. I want to get to how terrible the incumbent Republican is, as per usual. But I want to start a little bit on your background, because you have a really amazing background in activism, in energy policy. You formed some nonprofits to fight to the front line pollution for clean water, et cetera, in West Virginia. Can you talk about that a little bit? Tell us about your background.
Absolutely. So professionally, my background is in energy policy on the sort of consumer side of things. So I've spent the last decade a lot of time fighting with our utility monopolies in West Virginia, as they've demanded hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate bailouts at the expense of West Virginia electricity customers. I've stood up for stronger energy efficiency and rooftop solar programs in West Virginia. And those experiences have really highlighted to me the amount of political power of, particularly the utility industry, but in general, the ability of wealthy interests in West Virginia to write our laws and to buy off politicians. So, that's one of the sort of formative things that I've brought with me into this race. And then I've also been very involved in the community in Charleston, West Virginia, where I live. In 2014, we had a chemical spill that contaminated the drinking water for Charleston and the surrounding area. It made national news, so some folks may remember that. But I co-founded a community group that came together at that time to fight for safe drinking water, and we ended up in a 3-year battle with the water utility, and ended up winning some improvements to keep chemicals out of our drinking water. And after the 2016 election, I started to get more involved in electoral politics, and co-founded Rise Up West Virginia. It's a group that's based in Charleston and that has helped elect some progressive candidates to the city government and the state legislature out of our county in the 2018 elections, and particularly around issues of healthcare for all and funding for public education.
Awesome. Has any of that taken form in legislation? Have you been as Rise Up or any of those local candidates been effective in terms of getting regulations put on these energy companies?
Yeah, so Rise Up has been focused more on healthcare stuff, but in the last couple of sessions, Rise Up was helpful in passing a couple of pieces of legislation that expanded Medicaid in West Virginia, including to cover pregnant women, for example, and also a bill to cap insulin prices.
Amazing! Wow, that's amazing. And without Rise Up, those things would not have happened. So, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, there were other groups involved, so I don't want to take credit for everyone's
yeah.
work, but we were definitely involved.
That's awesome. So, suffice it to say, you've made some good enemies through all of that activism in terms of fighting monopolies and energy companies and pharmaceutical companies and so forth, I would say, right?
Absolutely. I'm proud to count them as not endorsers of our campaign.
Right. Like Bernie had on his presidential, people who do not endorse me, right? Unendorsed,
right.
That's what they called it. That was awesome. So, I wanted to just highlight that, because that, you do not take corporate PAC money. This is a grassroots funded campaign. Cathy is clearly an advocate for the people. And let's talk a little bit about your district, right? So before I get too much further, kunkelforcongress.com. You should go throw her a donation. You have mechanisms to volunteer. I'll highlight that more as we go. But grassroots campaigns need our money more than anybody, right? So let's take a look at your district. Your district is one of those insanely shaped districts. So West Virginia's district, it's 2. It's kind of the north part of the state. Usually I give candidates an opportunity, just brag on your district. Tell me about West Virginia 2. What makes it awesome?
Yeah, it's a really interesting district, and not just the shape of it, but it's a very diverse district. So in the sort of southwestern part of the district is Charleston, which is the capital of West Virginia. And then in the very far eastern part of the district, the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, is the other kind of main population center in the district. And they're very different areas. The Eastern Panhandle is, an hour and a half from Washington, D.C. It's more like an exurb of Washington. It's trending more Democratic as more people have moved into that area from D.C. and the D.C. suburbs. And then between Charleston and the Eastern Panhandle is just this beautiful rural West Virginia. And, it's a different economy. It's, an area that is struggling like a lot of rural areas across our country with lack of internet access and the monopolization of agriculture that has put the squeeze on small farmers across the country. But so there's just a lot of different issues and a lot going on across the district.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough district to campaign in, just because the terrain is so spread out. What kind of challenges have you faced just logistically running in this district? And I imagine media is different, right? You have a newspaper here and maybe newspaper there, right? It's probably disjointed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the good thing is that there's still a lot of small, like county-specific papers around the district. So that's actually been, a good thing. But we do suffer, I think, like a lot of the country, that we have fewer newspapers than we used to and fewer media outlets, which is a problem across the country. And it's obviously a lot of driving, and it's been also a challenge during the pandemic times too, just in terms of reaching folks, especially in parts of the state that don't have good internet connections.
Yeah, all the more reason to volunteer for a campaign like Cathy's, right? She needs. I'm assuming on your website you have text to campaign. You have people can volunteer text bank, phone bank.
Yes, people can absolutely volunteer to text bank and phone bank. We have a goal of reaching 100,000 voters by phone and text by the end of the election cycle. And we've actually have just reached a milestone of hitting close to 80,000 voters by postcard. So we've been doing a lot of grassroots outreach throughout the district despite the pandemic.
That's great. And it's Cathy is recently endorsed by Bernie Sanders. So that's, as far as this page goes, that's probably the best endorsement you could hope for. And that you kind of tick all the boxes in terms of progressive policy, but let's just go down them and how they apply to your district specifically. And then I want to focus on energy, which we'll sort of take globally, right? But just within your district, West Virginia is often seen, there's an opioid crisis there. There are disproportionately issues with poverty. Can you talk about your platform as far as opioids and poverty?
Absolutely. I mean, West Virginia does have one of the highest overdose death rates in the country. And we are one of the poorest states in the country, perpetually. We have been for a long time. And our platform, on the addiction crisis, we are talking about investments in prevention and treatment and long-term recovery. The need, and I've been really intrigued actually by Iceland and how they have gotten their teen substance abuse rate down over the last couple of decades, really by focusing on investment in after-school programs and activities for youth, which obviously we need in general, not just to deal with addiction. So that's a big issue for us, of course, in West Virginia. And then strengthening our healthcare system is critical. It's one of the reasons I support Medicare for all and, support the federal government negotiating prescription drug prices and making sure that mental health care actually is on parity with physical health care, which, it never is because insurance companies seem to love to deny mental health claims in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned universal broadband. I mean, just like with Medicare for all and living wages and, paid family medical leave and all that stuff, like reality is endorsing all of these things. And during a pandemic, people are working from home if they're lucky to be still employed, and can do so remotely. Children are home learning. Can you talk about where you stand on broadband and the benefits, particularly in the rural areas, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's been a huge problem for a while, but particularly in this pandemic where we have, basically like high school kids having to like drive to parking lots to like download assignments, and because they don't have internet at home. So it's just exacerbating the inequalities that we already had here in West Virginia because of our underfunded public education system. And there's been a lot of talk about bringing broadband to West Virginia over the years, and we keep relying on Frontier, which is a telecommunications monopoly, and we keep seeming to hope that they're going to build out broadband, which of course they never have because it's not profitable for them. And we need to treat this like we treated rural electrification back in the 30s, where we said, well, obviously the private companies aren't going to do this because it's not profitable, so we need public entities to own the infrastructure. And that's underway in some parts of the district. There's actually a small telephone cooperative in one county in my district that got a federal grant a decade ago and built out broadband infrastructure, and that county is one of the best served in the state. So it obviously can be done. We just haven't built the political infrastructure to do it.
Right. Is that one of the, so the incumbent is Alex Mooney, Republican, and we'll talk about his energy conflicts of interest, shall we say, to be polite. But I'm assuming is he an obstructor for things like broadband? And you said there's a monopoly there.
I don't know that he's so much an obstructor. I mean, the biggest thing about Alex Mooney in the district is that he's just simply not here. He was a state senator in Maryland who lost his seat there and then moved across the border into West Virginia to run for and win this seat in 2014. And he's just incredibly absentee. I meet mayors and county commissioners who have not met the man in the 6 years that he's been in Congress. So, it's not so much that he's holding up broadband in West Virginia, he's just not doing anything about it.
Right. Yeah, that's and the shape of the district, it's a big district, but in 6 years to not have actually.
Yeah, you can make it around in 6 years, I'm pretty sure. Right. I mean, I've managed in the last year, so.
Right, it's not so big that, so that's clearly a choice that he's making. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it's, you can see it in his funding too. I mean, he gets 90% of his funding from out of state, a lot of corporate PACs. He sits on the House Financial Services Committee, so there's a lot of Wall Street PAC money coming in. And, obviously he thinks, and it's been true so far, that he can just win with that outside support, and he doesn't need to do much for the district, which is unfortunate, and we hope to prove him wrong this time.
Yeah, that's sad. But I'm sure he hears about it in all his frequent and regular town halls, right?
Oh, of course, yes, which he never has, even pre-COVID, I should say. He does not have in-person town halls in the district. And, in the last couple months, I've had, I think, probably over 20 outdoor town halls just in the last couple months. So,
yeah. So when you're talking to, it's a red district, right? And there's always that you have to overcome that framing that they've been propagandized, with, we can talk about energy policy, but if you approach them and say Green New Deal, they've already been sort of, primed to reject that, or, Medicare for All, they're sort of primed to reject that. So, it's a blessing that you don't have him doing town halls or doing face-to-face, because, that underscores his absence, but you still have to overcome that framing. How has the reception been when you go talk about, I'm not even going to call them left policies, people-centered policies? Like, how's the reception been?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. And I want to push back a little bit on your question, because even though people around the country look at West Virginia and just say, oh, it's Trump country, it's all red, there's a lot more to it than that. We're also the state that led the nation in teacher strikes 2 years ago, and we had thousands of teachers in our state capital chanting about raising taxes on the gas industry to fund public education and public employee health insurance. So there's these populist demands really do resonate here. And I would say that people are just more frustrated with the establishment of both parties than, particularly strongly Republican. And in fact, voter registration wise, the Republicans are only a couple of percentage points more than Democrats in the district.
Right on. Awesome. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, there were a lot of races, like Paula Jean Swearengin last time around. Richard Ojeda, I think, did fairly well in his primary.
Yeah, Ojeda did amazingly well. I mean, just considering just the swing in his district, how much better he did compared to in 2016.
It was like 23 points or something. It was a huge swing that he did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was the biggest in the country. I'm almost positive.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, forgive me for that framing. Um, I stand corrected, and you're right. That West Virginia teachers strike was where that was inspirational with the red shirts. I had friends out there on the front lines. That was really something. Um,
Yeah, and it really politicized a lot of teachers. And it was, the strike actually happened in 2018 after the deadline to file and run for office. So we actually saw a lot of teachers file to run this year in 2020. It's sort of the consequence of the strike. And some of them made it through the primary too. So we've got a fair number of teachers on the ballot this year, which is really cool.
That's cool. Put a pin in that. I'm going to ask you at the end if there's anybody else on your slate that you want to make mention of. I always like to do that. Let's talk about legalization, right? One of the things I've heard policy wise or proposed is, some of the Appalachia where it's been sort of strip mined or whatever, that is fertile ground for, potentially planting crops and cannabis and whatnot. Can you talk about where you stand on that and any other ideas energy wise about revitalizing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think legalizing cannabis would be a real economic boon for West Virginia. I mean, obviously, we need to do everything we can to revitalize our economy here. And, it's also critical from a criminal justice standpoint as well. I mean, I think decriminalizing marijuana is something that absolutely needs to happen federally to help to end the racial injustice in our criminal justice system and reduce our prison population. And yeah, it is one of the things that could be grown on post mine sites. And as well, there's a lot of interest in putting large scale solar arrays on those sites too, in part because they're usually pretty close to electrical transmission infrastructure since the mines need a lot of electricity to begin with. So,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, and part of our platform is investing in reclamation of abandoned mine sites because that puts people back to work specifically in those communities where the coal industry has been declining.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump did run in 2016 saying he was going to bring back all the coal mines. Has that happened?
It has not. It has not. The coal industry is way down relative to where it was a decade ago, and that's not going to change. I mean, it's had. I think 2020 has been the worst year for the coal industry yet, and as we look ahead to dealing with climate change, which is obviously a national crisis at this point, we're just not going to see the mines coming back to what they were here in West Virginia, and we need leadership that's going to fight for the federal resources that we need to manage this transition. Because so far, all we've gotten is just a bunch of bankruptcy cases in which the CEOs walk away with more money and try to take away healthcare and pensions for the workers, and that's obviously completely unfair, and we owe it better to miners and their families.
Yeah, especially the miners with the healthcare repercussions, the health impacts of working in the mines, right?
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the National Mining Association tried to use the COVID crisis as a an excuse to cut taxes on even more. I think the black lung tax. So you know,
God, that's terrible. It just gets
yeah.
worse and worse. Like just when you think you've seen the worst. Let me ask a little bit about the incumbent, right? So there was one story that I read about First Energy PAC, which is there's a bit of a bribery scandal, but it basically seemed like they kind of bought every politician along the path of a pipeline or whatever that they wanted, and he was one of the recipients. I think I saw 7,500 to Alex Mooney. Can you talk about that story?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't a pipeline story. So the bribery scandal was that came to light was in Ohio, where they I think it was $60 million that they spent bribing elected officials in Ohio, including the Speaker of the House, to pass this bill to bail out their struggling nuclear power plants in Ohio. And it's interesting because they had couple of similar bailout schemes in West Virginia to get their struggling coal plants bailed out here. One of which was successful, one of which they didn't succeed in. But nothing has come to light about shady dealings in West Virginia. But certainly very very shady dealings in Ohio, and I'm proud to not be accepting money from First Energy PAC or any other corporate PACs.
Yeah. So when you talk to constituents, do they like, how aware are they of that story, and that they're being screwed basically by the representation?
Yeah, I mean, I think some folks have paid attention to the first energy scandal, but I think in general, people just realize in West Virginia that we're being hurt by a lot of corporations. And I think that the things that probably are more salient to people are like prescription drug prices, or the fact that the pharmaceutical industry has dumped so many millions of pills into West Virginia over the last decade. And health insurance is obviously a racket that I hear about constantly from folks. So the not taking corporate money message certainly resonates with people for those reasons. I mean, people can see that our economy is not working for everyday West Virginians. It's just working for a few at the top.
Yeah. How do you flip them from being disenfranchised to being excited to wake up, get dressed, go out and vote for you on November 3rd? That's a tough ask, no?
Yeah. No, I mean it's a good question, because I think a lot of West Virginians do feel disenfranchised, and for good reason. We've been the poorest state one of the poorest states in the country for a long time. We've had political leadership that in both parties that hasn't really been fighting for working people. And one thing that was really exciting this year was the emergence of West Virginia Can't Wait, which was a slate of candidates, is a slate of candidates that are all not taking corporate money in our campaigns. And it was spearheaded by a fellow named Stephen Smith, who ran for governor here and lost in the primary. But we've still got dozens of candidates in other races up and down the ballot who are campaigning on that pledge. So that really is, I think, helping to drive the narrative to have, it's not just me doing this and trying to convince people to vote for me. It's more of a movement, and so people can see that there's it's not just one candidate's political slogan. It's a growing phenomenon here.
Yeah, and even on your website, you have "for the many, not the few," right? So
Yes.
You're going about the slogan. It's the not me, us, sort of spirits, which, again, is indicative of any authentic grassroots campaign. So, again, kunkelforcongress.com, please make a donation to Cathy. She's fighting a good fight. If you think she's going to get into the House and then suddenly start taking money from Raytheon, you're insane. Clearly, this is
not going to happen.
Right. This is exactly who we want in the House of Representatives. We'd be blessed to have 435 Cathys representing us, right? Let me ask about your energy policy, and if you were to be in the House, like right now, right? What would you be fighting for in terms of your energy policy, not just within your district, but sort of in a global sense?
Right, absolutely. So, as I said earlier, I mean, I think the climate crisis is just becoming too severe of a crisis to ignore. And the fossil fuel industry has obviously done its best over the last decades to buy off politicians to block action on the issue. But I'm confident that we're going to see national legislation on climate change within the next few years. And I want to be in Congress because I want West Virginia to have a seat at the table in that. I really feel like the rest of the country owes a debt to Appalachia for the coal and the gas that has powered this country for so long. Billions of dollars of wealth have been extracted from our state. And, as I've been saying, we've perpetually been one of the poorest states in the country. So we need to bring in infrastructure investment, environmental reclamation, clean energy manufacturing jobs to West Virginia and other areas that have been, dependent on the fossil fuel industry historically, so that we can transition our economy without leaving folks behind.
Yeah, and I'm going to go so far as to say, the Republican incumbent is essentially paid to leave those people behind, right? If he's working for the energy companies and not for his constituents, which, like you said, if he's not showing up and doing town halls, he's not even trying. He's not even pretending to try, right? He's just taking, the corporate bribes and continuing to leave West Virginia behind. He's not fixing these problems. Like you said, he's absent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He also keeps introducing a bill to put us back on the gold standard. So not sure what that's about, but doesn't seem like it would help.
Interesting. How did he vote on the COVID? How was he on the COVID response?
Not great. So he was one of the 40 members of Congress who voted against the first coronavirus relief bill, which was the one that included free COVID testing and expanded paid sick days for more folks to be able to take time off work if they got sick during a pandemic. So, apparently, if it were up to him, we'd all be paying for these COVID tests that we're all getting now.
Yeah. So kunkelforcongress.com. We gotta get that terrible guy out of there and get Cathy in there fighting for the many, not just a few. So anything else that we didn't hit on that you want to talk about? Let's maybe we're talking about climate change as it relates to West Virginia. That's also a foreign policy issue. Obviously, your platform in this day and age, we have to focus largely on domestic policy. But if you were in the House, you'd have to contend with foreign policy. Where do you stand on some, like our military adventurism or Israel? Like, where do you stand on some foreign policy issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think that Congress has ceded way too much authority to the president in terms of ability to make war and get involved in foreign conflicts. So, I really think that we need to make sure that that Congress has real decision-making power over that to take that authority back. And particularly coming from a state that has one of the highest proportions of military service in the country, I really feel like that is key to my being able to actually, represent my state. And I also, we spend more on the military than the next 10 countries in the world combined. And so, when my opponent talks about, well, we can't afford these things like free COVID testing, it's obviously just a matter of priorities. We certainly could afford those things if we weren't spending insane amounts of money on our defense budget. And the Department of Defense can't even pass an audit. So, folks who are worried about government waste really should look at where the vast majority of the money is going, and the fact that that agency can't pass an audit.
Yeah. Are there a lot of people in West Virginia that that join the military just, I hate to frame it this way, but just out of desperation because of other lack of opportunity and so forth?
Well, I mean, I don't want to comment on people's reasons for joining, but we do have one of the highest proportions of military service in the country, and we have a lot of veterans too. So obviously, strengthening the VA and making sure that our veterans get the highest quality healthcare is a priority as well.
Yeah, but if there were investment in other programs like sustainable energy, like I said, building out solar and so forth, there would be additional opportunities, right? So they,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I meant by that. I didn't mean to negatively frame that. So who I mentioned earlier, who else is on your slate? Who else do you want to make mention of that's running in West Virginia that's a progressive or, at least has a good shot of flipping a red seat blue?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the local level, I do want to shout out my friend Rusty Williams, who's running for House of Delegates. He's actually also been endorsed by Bernie Sanders and is really inspired to run by his own personal healthcare cancer horror story. So he's a huge proponent of Medicare for all and for legalization of medical marijuana too.
Right on. So if you were in the House, you would sign on to Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill.
I absolutely would, 100%.
Right. And you would not suddenly start taking money from whatever other evil company I can think of, Bank of America or,
There will be no corporate PAC money in my current campaign or any future campaigns.
Love it. Love it. Well, you could tell, like, I wouldn't be talking to you otherwise. And you could tell, like, if you look at the history of the candidates that I have on, like, there's an authenticity to you, to all these, amazing people that are running for these offices out of, a true motivation to serve the public rather than a career or a lobbyist job or whatever. Like, that's why I start off with your background in energy policy. That was motivated by, a personal, to do good, right? Public service, right? It wasn't, wasn't you were chasing a paycheck, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm sure I could have made more money on the other side of those fights.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes a huge difference. Like we would be blessed to have, a house full of, unbought and unbossed, uncorrupt candidates like Cathy, representatives like Cathy. So, kunkelforcongress.com. Please sign up to volunteer. Like you said, you have phone banking, you have text banking, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we need more volunteers. So please sign up. We've got 5 weeks left.
Awesome. And throw her a donation, $10, $20, $100, up to whatever, $2,700. I think it probably is the max, right?
28 actually is the max now, but
28,
whatever you
2,800.
can do is fantastic.
Yeah. So, these grassroots campaigns, she's going up against energy packs, right? She needs our money. She needs our help, right? She needs our time. So, yeah, anything that we didn't hit on, Cathy, that you want to make mention of?
No, I think we covered it all. Really great to be on here. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking some time to chat with me. Hopefully, the next time I talk to you, I can call you Representative Kunkel, and we can talk about the traction you're getting and what you're doing. I look forward to that day. And thanks for
Look forward to that too.
and thanks for all the work you did before running heretofore. Like that's admirable, honorable work, and it's thank you for doing that. Good stuff.
Thank you.
And good luck on November 3rd. November 3rd, Kunkel for Congress. Share this video, go like her page, share her stories, like, share, donate, volunteer, et cetera, et cetera. Let's help Cathy win this seat, flip this seat from a corporately owned Republican tool. I'm just going to call him that. So Kunkel for Congress, November 3rd. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.